listening to Give God 90, where we're not afraid of the tough biblical questions, because we will dig through the language, the culture, and the history to find the truth revealed in the words of our Creator.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for letting me spend some time with you. Yes, I am still unsupervised. Myra will be home in a couple of days, maybe sooner, depends on a couple of things, weather and that kind of thing. She doesn't like traveling in bad weather, and I don't blame her. I want to keep her safe. But not to be deterred, I will carry on. If you like what you hear, share buttons, like buttons, notifications, all those things, just tap them, click them, do whatever you got to do to them. Just helps people find us far easier, just like you did. So do somebody else a favor and spread this word around. If you haven't been to GiveGod90.com lately, maybe check that out. Author Jerry Mitchell is where the books are sold. Author Jerry Mitchell, all one word. That sounds funny, doesn't it? Wonder when we came up with that. Why do we call it all one word instead of no spaces? I don't know. Anyway, I digress. And I digress for a reason. And that is some of the things that I talk about, and very rarely do I watch a video that someone sends me. This one, it kind of piqued my interest. It really did. I usually don't take the time, but it wasn't that long. I think it was like 13 minutes. And it's actually from One Word on YouTube. You can look that up if you're interested. The title is "The Focus on Educated Preachers and Teachers is Hurting the Church." Now, I've kind of talked about something like that a little bit in the past. So it got my attention. Now, I can't find on the YouTube site, and I didn't spend a lot of time looking. I can't find the name of the fellow who is speaking, so I can't help you there. There's no description of that, no information with that in his description for the channel. But the premise he begins with is that the church has become far too reliant on highly educated pastors to keep a church going. And this gives the people who attend, the regular congregation, so to speak, makes them feel inadequate. And what he's talking about are pastors who go ahead and get their PhDs or whatever, some postgraduate degree. And I can see that a little bit. I've said before, I am familiar with a lot of pastors. I know a lot of pastors with postgraduate education. And I have mixed feelings. I really do. Most of them have this education and they don't know how to apply it. And then there's those who have this postgraduate degree, and it might be in theology, but depending on where it's from, it might focus more on philosophy. It might focus more on other things. So they have this degree, but it's not actually in Bible. Okay? They know what they know from their professors, from their school books. And it has a way of removing them from the average person in the congregation. And sadly, a lot of these pastors that I know with postgraduate degrees, they don't go to church. Okay? They just don't go to a service themselves. I guess, some of them I know think they know it all. Couple in particular. Not talking about you here, Sean. I know you go whenever you are physically able. But I agree that being reliant on one or two people with postgraduate degrees from seminary, Bible college, whatever it might be, these things can be detrimental to a church for several reasons. Now, I need to stop here and clarify something. Okay? A Christian pastor with a few letters at the end of their name is very different from a rabbi who might have the same letters, right? They're from two different schools, two completely different schools. So it's not fair to compare a pastor to a rabbi in this discussion. Rabbinic studies focus on Torah and prophets and the other writings, and of course the Talmud and that kind of thing. But a rabbi is intimately familiar with the Hebrew Bibles, what the Christians call the Old Testament. A preacher or pastor receives very, very little instruction in Old Testament. So you can't, it's kind of like comparing apples and aardvarks, right? One's a fruit, one's an animal. You just can't compare the two. It's not fair to compare those two. And so what I'm going to focus on is Christian pastors. Most pastors being educated in seminary or Bible schools today, they are far more equipped to handle the administrative procedures than they are equipped to deal with Bible questions. They can keep the business of the church running, but when it comes to actual Bible studies, answering questions that people have biblically, they are falling far short. And that's why the gentleman in the video, he makes a point that there were a lot of new churches built post-World War II in the United States, and those churches are losing members. Why is that? Well, the pastors, they might be able to run a business, but they're not trained to deliver a message from the Bible that they need to deliver. They have been trained, all you have to do is preach Jesus, right? That's their thing. Or they've been trained, just the Gospels. It's just the gospel. That's their training. So that's what they try to do. And people hear this and they question. Does this guy really, or girl, know? Does this person know what they're talking about? Can they actually pull a scripture out of the Bible and focus on what they need to focus on? Right? Can they, do they have what it takes to look at what they're reading and say, well, this comes from, if they're looking at something maybe in the Gospel of Matthew, can they look back and say, well, this comes from Psalms and this comes from Exodus and this comes from somewhere else? Can they go back and bring it to life? And that's what I try to do for you folks that listen regularly. I don't spend a lot of time preaching as much as I do offering you real, accurate information, as accurate as I know how to make it. So, the fella in the video uses Acts 4 for his example. And I think I've used part of this before as well. So let's look at it. Acts 4, beginning in verse 1 down through, I think, verse 10. While Peter and John were speaking to the people, okay, now, they had been brought into the Sanhedrin. While Peter and John were speaking to the people, the priests and the captain of the temple guard and the Sadducees came up to them. They were greatly disturbed that they were teaching the people and proclaiming in Jesus the resurrection of the dead. They seized Peter and John. Okay, they arrested them. And because it was evening, they put them in custody until the next day. They put them in jail. But many who had heard the message believed, and the number of men grew to about 5,000. The next day, the rulers, elders, and scribes assembled in Jerusalem, along with Annas the high priest, Caiaphas, John, Alexander, and many others from the high priest's family. They had Peter and John brought in and began to question them. By what power or what name did you do this? Then Peter, filled with the Holy Spirit, said to them, Rulers and elders of the people, if we are being examined today about a kind service to a man who was lame, to determine how he was healed, then let this be known to all of you and to all the people of Israel. It is by the name, and this is in verse 10. And what I'm reading from says, it is by the name Jesus Christ of Nazareth. That's not what they would have said. Okay? That is not what they would have said. It's how it's translated. He would have said, it is by the name Yeshua ben Joseph of Nazareth. Jesus, Joseph's son, who comes from Nazareth. And then he continues, whom you crucified, but whom God, the Father, raised from the dead, that this man stands before you healed. What we see is Peter and John being questioned by the Sadducees, the Sanhedrin. It's kind of the first century Jewish equivalent of a Supreme Court. Okay? And he's saying that Jesus is the one who healed, but it was God who actually did the healing. That's what they're saying. Peter addresses this court not from a defensive posture. He doesn't go in there trembling, okay? He goes in and he almost takes an offensive posture. He goes on the offense right away. And he makes the accusation, you're the ones that crucified him, but it was the Almighty himself, God himself, who raised him. Now Peter was typically always bold. He wasn't always bright, but he was always bold. And he wasn't really good at, like winning friends and influencing people, right? But this actually sets the stage for what comes next. If you skip down to verse 13, we're going to skip some narrative here. And it says, when they saw the boldness of Peter and John and realized that they were unschooled, ordinary men, they marveled and took note that these men had been with Jesus. Now the highly educated Sadducees and the others who were there, they were marveled. They were astonished. They were filled with wonder. In just what is recorded as a few short words, they were astonished. It says, these two unschooled, oh my, they had no formal training. They were ordinary. There was nothing special about them. But they left the Sanhedrin in complete amazement. Then there was apparently, let me read the next couple verses. Seeing the man who had been healed standing there with them, they had nothing to say in response. So they ordered them to leave the Sanhedrin. They ordered them to leave the court, and then they conferred together. They conferred together. You see, the Sadducees didn't put any, I want to say they didn't put any stock. The Sadducees didn't completely believe in the resurrection of the dead. Even though it's in the prophets, they didn't think it happens. They didn't understand that people are eternal beings, not terminal beings. The Sadducees and the highly educated, they wanted to keep the status quo, right? They wanted to keep things the way they had been. They didn't want this turmoil, because underlying all of this, underlying what's actually happening here, was another movement. And the Romans were terrified because they thought that at any minute, the Jews were going to rebel and revolt. And so the Sanhedrin didn't want to stir up anything that might look like that. They weren't ready yet. But the problem is, in this situation, you can't keep the status quo. They couldn't deny the miracles they'd seen themselves. They couldn't deny that many of the people witnessed the same things. They had been backed into a corner by two unschooled, ordinary men. Men with no letters behind their name, men who never set foot in any kind of class or lecture except to hear the things that Yeshua, Jesus, had to say. And what did he have to say? He didn't teach anything on his own. He only taught what God had sent him to teach. I made a point in my last episode that we need to be familiar enough with the Bible so that when we hear something or read something that doesn't agree with the Bible, we can recognize it. We can recognize it. I got a dose of this just a little bit ago, watching something, and it was a live broadcast, and one of the comments was, well, you can't prove God. It's not our job to prove God. It's God's job to prove God, right? It's the Creator's job to prove creation. It's that simple. We can't prove it. We're given the information if we choose to believe it. It's that simple. And I don't want to go recount the things I've said in the last 3 episodes, but you get where I'm coming from, right? Now, the Sanhedrin were very, very familiar with what was written in Torah and the prophets. They were very, very familiar with their man-made doctrines because they made most of them. They were familiar with the traditions that they themselves were trying to enforce. And the problem is that these two ordinary unschooled men were pointing out the difference, and they didn't like it. The fella in the video that I was watching, he didn't use the next passage, and I'm going to use it. I don't know why he didn't. But if you go to John 15, beginning in verse 14, Yeshua, Jesus, is speaking to the disciples. And he says, "You are my friends if you do what I command you. No longer do I call you servants, for a servant does not understand what his master is doing. I call you friends because everything I have learned from my Father I have made known to you." See, his teaching is not his own. It comes from the one who sent him. You did not choose me, but I chose you and appointed you. Now, the King James version actually uses the word ordained, but it means the same thing. You were appointed, you were ordained, you were chosen, you were established. What were they established for? To go and bear fruit that will remain, so that whatever you ask in my Father's name, he will give you. That last part was added. It's in italics. The fruit that will remain. You were chosen. You were appointed. You were ordained so that you could teach others how to live the way you're designed by your Creator to live. The Almighty didn't choose the educated or the rich, or even those who, even those who are well known or well liked, right? You could say that God chooses the ones he chooses for his reason, not our reasons, right? You could say that. something I was thinking when the fellow in this video was talking about is how since the 1950s, right, post-World War II, the church has been losing members. It was about that same time that the average people in the congregations were really no longer teaching Sunday school or leading Bible studies. They left that up to the pastors. They left that up to those with Bible college experience and degrees, right? In a lot of churches I'm most familiar with, that was when the people who had attended Bible college, that's when they got those jobs. You come back from Bible college, you've got to teach Sunday school, right? My father-in-law was a great example of that. He was a pastor, he was a missionary, and the last few years he was able to attend church. What was his job? Teaching men's Sunday school. It's what you do. I don't know why, but it's what you do. What happened since that time is undeniable. The church has actually faltered. Many have failed. Many have failed. Many have failed to the point where they just no longer exist. The reliance upon the educated pastors and preachers has proven maybe not a complete failure yet, but it's heading that way. It's heading that way. And hopefully you're asking, why? What's wrong with having the educated teach the uneducated? You see, when we defer to the educated and accept their leadership, their direction, their concepts, their ideas, their traditions, and their doctrines, we stop studying for ourselves. Yes, I emphasize that. When we rely on someone else to tell us what to think and how to think, we stop studying for ourselves. We stop asking questions. We stop growing. And when we stop growing, just like any muscle, it begins to atrophy. It begins to waste away. That's why this is failing. People stopped. They stopped reading the Bible when they went home. They stopped studying. They stopped thinking about it. They just wait until the next time they're in Sunday school class or the next time they're in church. And what do? They sit there and they listen. And they're like, oh, okay, that's what I got to do. That's how I got to think about this. Okay. What I'm hearing might not exactly agree with what I read, but okay, I'll take it. I'll do it. You see, when the church stops getting together for meaningful Bible study, and it stops allowing questions to be raised, answers to be searched, the church itself begins to waste away. I've seen it. I've seen it from both sides. I've seen what happens when a thriving church places more trust on their doctrine, maybe even the doctrine of their denomination. When they put more trust and more faith in the books that tell them how to run the church rather than in the Bible that tells them how to live, that church is in a lot of trouble. And I've seen what happens when a small group of people get together. I've seen what happens when they're faithful, when they study, when they teach each other. And that group has videos that are watched over and over again all around the world, right? I've seen it happen both ways. I've seen what happens when a thriving church stops studying and just listens. They don't read, they don't study, they don't do. And I've seen what happens when a few people get together and teach each other. Right? By the way, that group is Messianic Delaware. You know, I don't have any letters at the end of my name. I don't want any letters at the end of my name. I'm not well known other than for the people who listen to me And I don't need the recognition. I don't even want the recognition. I could use the money. I just don't need the recognition. And you might be thinking you don't have those things either. You might be saying, well, I don't have a formal education. I don't have, nobody knows who I am. It's okay. Do you think anybody knew who a few fishermen were in the first century? Their families did. But, not too many other people did. If you're thinking you don't have these things, but you're listening to this, you have what it takes to be ordained. You have what it takes to be chosen. You have what it takes to be established. Maybe not by mankind, but by the Creator himself. You don't need a degree to represent your Creator. You don't even need to have gone to a Bible college. You don't need to have gone to a seminary. You don't need postgraduate degrees. What you do need is important, because what you need is willingness. You have to have the willingness to speak the words you're given. You have to be able to speak the words you're given to the people you need to speak them to. Oh my. And you can't add anything to it. Can't take anything away from it. Most importantly, though, you need to be willing to live the way you're designed to live. So when others look at you and they say, I don't know what it is about you, but there's something you have that I need in my life. I don't know what it is, but you're going to show me. You're going to show me. When that happens, it's not an open invitation to preach at them, but it is an open door to show them. You show them through your actions. You show them why you're set apart from the world, if you want to put it in a churchy way. If you're part of a church that doesn't allow someone with no formal education to lead meaningful Bible study, or you think you don't have the knowledge it takes, you might want to reconsider where you're at. There may be a time in the very near future that people are going to be looking to you for answers. Think about that. When they come to you and they ask, open a Bible with them and teach each other. You might be surprised what you learn yourself. Now, I'm going to add, back when I was going to church all the time, I've taken some of the classes that were offered by one particular denomination, and they don't come close to giving me the instruction or the knowledge that I was able to get just from opening the Bible with a few other people and looking at a particular passage and finding answers to questions together. Challenging each other. Iron sharpens iron. That's another one of those churchy phrases, right? No formal education is going to do that for you. I'll guarantee it. A formal education expects you to sit down, shut up, listen, and learn. Learn what the professor has to say, what they want you to learn. A formal education, as much as I don't like saying this, is going to teach you how to corrupt the scriptures to see it their way. A formal education expects you to do what the Sanhedrin was trying to do, because they want to keep the status quo. They want to keep things the same. That didn't work 2,000 years ago, and it's not going to work today. You can't remain stagnant, or you're going to waste away. You don't need to be highly educated, but hopefully you need to be informed, and you will be informed. And by the way, if you want to start a Bible study and you're looking for a guide, okay, you like, where do I start? I have questions, but where do I start? Tradition to Truth, my first book. That's a good one to start with. It's easy read, not that long, lots of references in it, and lots of places where you can get other references. You look up the passages right? Read them for yourselves, and not just what's included, the whole passage, right? What leads up to it, what happens after it. Look it up. Look it up. You see, if you're willing to be one of the chosen, one of the ordained, you've got to start. You've got to start somewhere. You've got to be active. You can't be stagnant. You can't just sit back and listen. You know, I try very hard not to tell you how to think, or, well, I try to teach you how to think, but not what to think. I give you a lot of information to think about. I hope that's my goal, so that you can make the decisions on your own, the decisions that will help you live the way you're designed to live. Hopefully, this has been informative. That was my goal. So until next time, I wish you many, many blessings, everyone.